Hello, everyone. I'm here today with Carrin Gilmore. Carrin is on the autism spectrum, and she is an educator. And to be honest, she's the first educator I've ever met that's on the spectrum. So it's going to be very cool to hear about all her experiences and her tips. Thanks for being here, Carrin.
You are so welcome. Yeah, it's so funny because I started wanting to be a teacher and hide my autism. And I was going into English. I was teaching high school and the middle school, but I stuck in high school. And my advocacy kind of became opposite, where I was in IEPs and, I'm like, I got all my stuff ready. I was excited. And then I was like, well, who's the case manager? And then it became an issue. And then the school site I worked at refused to work with 5 autistic kiddos. So I became their case manager. So for many high school teachers are like, oh God. So I was teaching like 180 kids, case managing 5. COVID hit my first year in the classroom as an intern. So I always tell people I had like a crash course. And so after that, I went and got my master's degree, which I was already kind of in the program for. I was like, do I need my master's? And then after that, I was like, yes. So I got my master's degree in special education. So both of my degrees are teaching. So I have single subject English and then, the multi-subject technically of special education. I am mild mod with autism certified and ELD certified. So those are fun terminologies you're going to need to learn. Basically all the certifications teachers get. Autism is one of the harder ones to get. So I was proud to be autistic certified as someone with autism. So that's my intro. I've been teaching for almost 4 years now. I taught in person for 2.5, and then I went virtual. Virtual for 2 years. The district was a whole year virtually, and then I stayed virtual because of my own health and issues. So it was kind of a turn. I missed the classes. I missed my students, but I also had to think of COVID myself. And I can tell you many educators who stayed in the classroom, y'all are amazing. So always got my respect. But yeah, it was
yeah. All right. So the first question I have for you is, how long have you been diagnosed with autism? And tell me a little bit about your diagnosis process.
I'm the golden age. I was 18 months when I was pre-diagnosed autistic. And then I got the official diagnosis when I was like 2 or 3. And I was already in programs, already receiving services. And I was in STARS Academy where I met Beth Biason, who taught me how to talk, because I was nonverbal until I was like 3 or 4. No, it was 3 because she taught me how to talk. So yeah, I'm kind of an interesting story because I was on I'm sorry to offend people, but the mild mod severe scale. I was severe when I was little. And now look at me. People are like, you're autistic. So my diagnosis journey was more doctors and when I was little, so I don't really remember it. But I remember my parents telling me a lot about it. We've talked about it, especially like as a sped educator, like we help out with this process. And, they told me like Kaiser showed them this video of a child banging their head against a wall. And doctors used to tell them that I would never be able to function in society. They're like, she'll never be able to do anything. And my mom was like, no way. And so my biggest advocate was my mother, hands down. And I tell a lot of people too, sadly, the other component, and I've spoken to a lot of higher functioning neurodiverse people from my time, because I was before schools had to provide services. So everything had to come out of parent pocket. And when I was younger, and so a lot of those of us in my generation who are higher functioning, sadly, are ones who had more affluent, wealthier parents. And I always say to them, there's my white privilege right there, because I was born into a family of wealth. They were able to provide and pay for private services that others could not. Even though they were waitlisted, they still were able to pay for that and afford it. Kaiser Permanente, which is my medical provider, never covered any of my autistic services. So just kind of telling people, because in some states they don't have to, but in California, that recently has changed. So I always tell everyone, I'm like, the evolution of medical sadly goes hand in hand with the functionality sometimes, because I think with schools taking over services, though, I've seen that shift, thankfully. But it has been kind of a sad moment where, affordability shouldn't be a reason you get a service you need. But it is sadly in our world. So I always say my diagnosis journey is one of I was very blessed. I was very young. And when you're little, there's so many services offered, like to little kids, so
Yeah.
many, the gambit, right? And then as you get older, less, less, less. I always make the
Yeah.
joke in elementary, you get a bunch of services, like so many. Middle school, they're like, they kind of like wish a way out because that's where I used to work was middle school setting. It was really hard to get kid services. And then high school, they're back in gambit full force. So I always make the joke it's an ebb and tide. But yeah, once you hit 18, you're screwed. Once you're over 25, because that's when a lot of districts no longer help or provide services for students, you're doubly screwed. So I tell people like the earlier diagnosis is key. And as educators, we can't be afraid of that. We kind of have to help parents be like, it's okay. Like, look, you can get all this stuff now. Instead of a lot of people are scared, the negative connotations. So
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great point about the services. Like I am still receiving them because I don't like have my own social security yet. But like once I do hit 25 and I'm able to get that on my own, then there's not a whole lot I can do. Like this is like I got one more year of college after this, so this is going to be my last year in the Disability Resource Center, which really has helped me get this far. So I definitely am a little nervous going into the career.
I'll be upfront with you. I was my Disability Service Center. I went through a few colleges, but University of the Pacific has a phenomenal one. Danny Nuss leads it. He's phenomenal, and he works with his workability center. So like they provide training afterward. He just has to like not be. It's a weird thing, but they're able to like provide services. But even like for kids who are in programs, like live-in programs through the districts, they only keep them till they're like 25, and that's like a rare case. They try to get them out usually by 22, 23.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's why it's really tough. And I tell people like, be appreciative of the services you get and carpe diem it, like seize the moment because it's not going to be forever. I am 28 years old. I haven't had services since I was, well, I didn't utilize my services a lot, especially like in my master's program. I probably should have, but I didn't. But mine were more like accommodations for like teachers to, like I have an attendance flexibility because I have a seizure disorder, right?
Okay.
And I always make the joke, everyone loves it when you talk to them, you meet with that professor, you're like, hey, I have this seizure disorder. You don't want me coming to class and having a seizure. They're like, oh no. But in practice,
They're
that's a
like,
whole nother ball
you're
game.
here.
And then they try to dock my grades.
Oh, geez.
So I always tell people, I'm like, you learn to be your own advocate in college, truly.
Absolutely.
Like I had, you have to be, otherwise you're,
Yeah. So why did you decide to become a teacher?
Because how do I say this nicely? I wanted to be that good teacher that I had, and there was not a lot of them.
Yes.
And especially in middle school, I was kind of SOL. And so I really decided teaching because I wanted to be that good teacher. And I had horrible experiences with educators throughout my educational career, whether or not it be in college, whether or not it be in, I think elementary. Yep, never mind. I had a fourth grade teacher who was a teacher from hell who would yell at me for asking questions. And then middle school was just a nightmare. I mean, so I always tell people, I'm like, I was not an educator. I always tell, I'm like, I wasn't the educator who's like, I love kids. That's why I'm doing this. I was like, no, I want to be good for people. I'm very student centric, which is where like your focus is on the kiddos, almost to a fault. And I would blame my autism for it because that's like my fixation is how the kids are doing. So I always make
and I will say that's not like, I think that's a combination of autism and our own experiences, because we know like just how harmful that can be. We've been through that firsthand. So it's a combination of like condition and experiences. That's what I like to say.
Like that, conditions and experiences for sure. And then my school program was really cool because I had used a lot of my experience. We'd write essays about it. It's like, what would you change if you were that teacher? What would you do differently? And so it really helped me kind of work through that trauma and make it into a PowerPoint, right? Now I'm like, I'm going to be that teacher I want to be. And so I'm a huge believer in SEL because of that and all kinds of things. I won't ramble about that. But yeah, my why is because I had too many bad experiences and not enough good.
That's exactly my experience. And the first good teacher I ever had was in third grade. That's why I'm going into third grade, to really like kickstart these kids and like get them on the right path early. Because it's the time is definitely very precious and very urgent when it comes to positive growth. So the earlier you can start that positive reinforcement, the better.
Yeah, and I loved middle school and high school are my niches, particularly middle
Mm,
school. I like the attitude. I love
I
the
don't.
attitude. You know what? I tell people there is a reason there's a spectrum of teachers, right? Because I
Right.
remember in my teaching program, I did a few of them. I did two of them. And one of them I worked with elementary. I think it was third graders. I never have wanted to kill children until I worked with them because I was like, this is worse than herding cats. I can't do this. I'm super hyper. And those kids fed off my energy. So we were all bouncing off the walls. But put me in a middle school classroom, they're tired. They're like, they like my energy. So I tell them, like, we need people like you who teach third, right? And we need people like me who can do middle school and high school because it
Yes.
is important. You
I
know,
uh, I
I
definitely
bless you for teaching third.
well, I definitely have too much energy. Like I know I'm a rare case with that. So
It's good though. I've seen some third grade teachers with that energy who rock it. I was just not one of them. And
oh
so
yeah,
I always make the joke to people, I'm like, there's a reason there's a spectrum of teachers, right? Like it takes a
totally.
different teacher to teach third grader than a sixth grader.
Yeah.
So I'm glad. Woo.
All right. So have you had any students yet with autism? And if so, what was that experience like?
Oh yeah. I've dealt with a lot of kiddos with autism. And who's call it? We have like a third sense when there's an autistic person and you meet them. You're like, I feel like I connect with you. Like there's something about you because I work in middle school and high school, right? They're like, something about you, something about you. And it's like a click and it helps a lot with student relationships. So I build really good relationships with a lot of neurodiverse kiddos, but autism particularly. I worked actually in a first and kindergarten setting with autistics
Hmm.
and the kids were fantastic. Teachers were like, they never do that. How are they doing it with you? And I was like, treat them the way I'd want to be treated.
It's
So
it's a special way.
I just I find that so many people with little kids on the spectrum feel like you can't make them uncomfortable, and that's
Hmm.
not, I'm like, no, okay, if you want to stim, let's stim at a certain time. I had like stim classes, like how to stim
Okay.
and how to like do all these fun things. So I think that my autism helped me teach my autistic kids.
Totally.
And I think my favorite was I had a student who was like, I can't say you don't understand what it's like to be autistic because you are. I'm like, that's right. You can't tell me I don't know what it's like.
That's
You
right.
know, I live it. So yeah, I think working with autistic kids has been fun, but I really just like working with neurodiverse kids in general and kids in general. I'm better with neurodiverse kids than adults. I have mentored a lot of college students, like when I was in college, I mentored people
Yeah.
and it was fun, but it was hard. I tell everyone, I was like, I had a harder time working with autistic young adults, like who were in college, like seniors and up. I don't know. It's just a weird moment where it was like we kind of, they liked me, but it was a different level. And so I prefer middle school and I prefer like, the age is good for me for that. And
Totally.
that's what
Yeah.
you'll find as a teacher, by the way. You find your niche, you find your grade that works.
Right.
And it's hard to describe why. And I would say part of my experience was working with disabled kiddos in general and autistic. They always gave me the autistic kids, but just kind of like treating them the way I wanted to be treated when I was their age was super important. I was like,
Absolutely.
well, but what I wish the teacher would have done with me, sat and talked. So I sit and talk to a lot of my kiddos, like a lot of them. We're just
Right.
like, how you
Yeah.
feeling today? Especially in middle school. And they're like, I feel like, I let them curse, which is something else. A lot of people are like, really? I'm like, well, yeah, because as soon as they go back in that classroom, we're not cursing anymore. Though I did, when I taught English, do a lesson on how to curse, because they're adjectives. And so I work in very impoverished areas, low
Okay.
income, etc. Like half the population I worked with was either Latino or Black. And so that kind of brings up another, like, I'm a white person teaching them. So I was always like, I want to get on your level. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, that's definitely like great advice and like great experiences that you shared. I mean, I know like I'm just going to be so excited when I get my first autistic student that's in gen ed, because it's like, you know, I'm able to show him the ropes in a way that I can't with other kids, um, and I'm just like able to have a special connection that I can't without with the other kids. So
Well,
I'm
when I
so
taught gen ed, I didn't share that I was autistic with kids
okay. See,
until there
well,
was issues with the case manager.
I'm not gonna do that either. I'm gonna like do that with the
But
parents.
they knew. I can tell you the kids knew. Like when I worked in high school, the 5 kids I had to take over case managing, they knew. They were like, there was something, I respect you more. Like they were very attentive in my class. And then it came out in their IEP that I was too. And so I would say, like, when I was a case manager, I always told parents, and that was a big selling point. They're like,
Yeah,
boom, parents were relaxed. They're like, oh, you understand, you get it. So I think it's how you
yeah,
present your autism that can be more powerful to these kids, because some of them, like I said, when they learned I was autistic, I had one kid go, can I hug you? Like I knew I liked you, but now I really like you. Straight face, just like that. I said, come here. And so I think that it is a PowerPoint in a way of society has such a view of autism and what it's supposed to look like,
yeah.
so it's like
Well,
when you
yeah, and that's definitely one of my points to like introduce that strategy into my classroom, because parents the likelihood is that at least some of them will be very misinformed, and they think like, oh, it's so hard for an autistic person to be successful. My kid has autism, what should I do? And then they're going to find out that I have autism, like, hey, I have a college degree, I have a job, I live on my own, and that's going to like really help them, I think.
no, it does. I will tell you right now, that's what parents would tell me. They're like,
Mhm.
what? And I remember in a gen ed study, it's funny because you'll work with what's called RSPs. That's what I did. I was a resource specialist. And so we come in and we help you out with accommodations and modifications. And it's really helpful to have a teacher who gets it, because half of my job as a sped ed teacher was educating teachers. Like,
Yes.
all right, like this is that. And I've worked with some incredible, oh my God, incredible elementary teachers. Like I remember this kindergarten teacher, she had a young man with autism and I loved this kid, but oh my God, he was your very stereotypical.
Mm,
And she was like, I feel guilty saying that. I was like, no, he is. Like, there's a reason there's a stereotype, right? And she's like,
right,
yeah.
exactly.
I was like, so how
It
would you help
applies.
him? And she's like, this is my ideas. And so we started doing it, and it worked great. And so I think that part of what I did as a teacher, because my advocacy started in teaching, not in like online or anything. I was in meetings. I was like talking with other educators. That was my real
Yeah,
first advocacy component. And people just have questions. So I would say, like, to any autistic educator, let people ask you questions, even if they offend you, because you want them to ask it, because then you can get rid of it.
hmm,
I had people say, well, isn't there a certain type of look autism is supposed to have? And I'm like, no, and then we could talk about it. And they're like, oh, good, because I was worried my child would have to look like that. And I'm like, no. So I always tell people, I'm like, take a deep breath as an educator, because you're going to get questions that they're not always, they're from a place of care. Like I've
yeah,
never met a parent where it was like not a place of care, or
mhm,
an educator even. Like they really want to know, but people don't know. And so we live in a world where like we kind of have to be advocates as
totally.
educators, whether or
Well,
not you want to be. So,
and that's why you and me like started our social media accounts. It's to do that and like to raise awareness, and inform good intentioned people, definitely.
yeah. I mean, I did mine for a college assignment, by the way. My junior year of
Oh.
college, in my bachelor's program, I was told we needed to make a blog, and I wanted to do exactly what you said, right? I was like,
Mhm.
cool. And then they're like, well, you need a social media account. You can't use you have to do social media. I was like, okay, I'll make this Instagram thing. And now here I am. It's always my joke. I'm like, didn't even plan on it. And then outside of teaching, I work I'm a neurodiverse advocate for the workforce, so I
Absolutely.
worked on board of directors, for a nonprofit, all these other things, because I realized I want the students I work with to go into a better future than the one we're in right now.
Totally.
And so, yeah, just a heads up, I will warn you as an autistic educator, your accommodations are going to be a nightmare to get. I wish someone would have warned me about that, but be very clear, concise, and fight, and make sure you have every document to back you up. I'm sorry, I know that's not one of your questions.
No,
Oh
no,
yeah, no, that is the unique gifts. Okay, because that is something a lot of like people don't understand is like, I thought, oh, I'm going into special education. They're going to get it. Like, I need accommodations like my students do. Not as much as you would think. So I would say that just make sure you know yourself and you have documentation, because that was something a lot of my coworkers were angry at. That was your next question. So sorry, I jumped into it. Like, what do I offer
wait,
my
what was that?
coworkers? It was the what are some
Actually,
unique gifts? It was the autistic educators in the school system. Sorry, you.
yeah.
And we do, and I think that part of it is like when I remember like my coworkers even saying, "Why can't she get her accommodation? Like, why is it so hard for an autistic educator to get their accommodation, but it's easier for our students to get it?" So I think that through our lives as a living, breathing example, we are able to educate not even just our parents and students, but our coworkers as well. Because, that is something I remember a lot of my coworkers, they're like, we want to help people, so why can't we help you? So sorry for skipping ahead on that one. But
Totally.
yeah, that's my big one. I wish someone would have told me that when I was going into teaching, that it was going to be a lot harder than I had planned for my own accommodations. Not my kiddos. I mean,
Yeah,
they had to fight for them. So it's like you fight for your students, you fight for yourself. And, you know, I just found that my principals and my colleagues either made or broke me in that way. So, yeah.
um,
Sorry.
no, it's totally good. What has your experience been like with your coworkers, and how does it compare to previous jobs?
What's the first job where I'm very open that I'm autistic, right?
Okay.
So like a lot of my coworkers are like, "Oh my God, you get what these kids are going through. Tell me how you would feel." And that was most of my educator friends. And I found it interesting because when I worked with first year teachers, they always were intimidated by me in their classroom. They either loved me and they wanted me there all the time, or they're like, "Go away, you're too good of a teacher." And it was kind of like, I'm here as like a help.
That's one of the
Um,
best insults someone could ever get.
right. And then I had other teachers, the teachers who were like 2 to 3 year, even some like 2 to 3 years, everyone wanted me in there. Like, can you come in? Why aren't you here today? I was like, because I have to go to this school site, this class. I wanted you
That's
here with me today. So it's only first year teachers where I ever got like the intimidated, like, I'm scared of how good you are. But I think that that's something I brought because it was like the kids know they have a connection, student relationships are key. And so when you have like a spidey sense moment with your student, they're like, "I like you, what's going on?" It kind of helps in the classroom. So yeah, I would just say like I brought an experience of being autistic, and a lot of my coworkers, I can tell you, were really angry at how I was treated by the district, or by actually charters were even worse. So,
uh,
and
well,
that was kind of a fun moment because it was like they were angry at how I was being treated.
I'm
Angry.
I'm
So
trying to go into a charter school, but I have heard bad things about like treatment, especially with diverse teachers.
yeah, and I will say very upfrontly, it depends on what charter school you go into. So I've had one charter school where they actually, like, part of their process, like with interviewing me, was like, "Well, what kind of accommodations would you want, and do you, like, could we meet them?" And I really liked that because,
Yeah,
like, as a sped educator, I don't have a classroom, and so I said, you know what, I really need my own classroom. And so that's why I wasn't able to do the position. But it was nice to be able to like talk about that. And that's something I talked with a lot of the companies, it's like that's another topic. But like I think that charter schools, so like in California, there's one charter school I will never work at again. That was atrocious. I won't name them because I don't want to like bad talk, but there were some districts, by the way, like the districts were easier with HRs. Like I thought districts would be a nightmare in some case, but like you at least knew who to go to. Like they're very clear about go to this person for this need. Like it was very easy to understand. And charters, there was none of that. It was very confusing on who I needed to go to for my accommodations, right? I'm like, and then the charter school said they would take 9 months. And I was like, that's bullshit. Excuse my language. I was like, And then the districts had me accommodated within, well, I was late on my district accommodation. So that's on me, right? I was late, but they did it in like 3-4 weeks. I was able to start having my own accommodations. And even like when I wasn't, like my principal did my accommodations, even when the district wasn't fully backing them. And that was really cool too. Because, they're like, you need this, go. Like that's an easy one. Go sit in your office for 5 minutes. That's an easy accommodation, done. So, as an educator, I kind of had to learn how to advocate for my own accommodations, especially within.
By sitting in the office, do you mean like a cool down period? Or
I had my own little office, actually. So I had my own little office. So yeah, I had a cool down period because it was right as COVID was re-lashing itself out. And I was like getting married. And my principal was like, all right, Dory, Carrin, go sit. And both the jobs I've had to leave had said they would love to have me back. And that's the cool part is like, you want to end on good terms, right. And I did not with this charter school. Actually, they said I did, but I wouldn't go back kind of thing. But you always want to make sure like an educator, I don't know, it's a blessing being autistic because I'm very blunt. So they can't say they didn't know. I'm like, how many emails, how many things did I tell you? I think, the hardest part of being an educator for me wasn't the students. My colleagues, I had a few teachers from hell when it came to IEPs because that was my job, But overall, like, I love teaching. I love kids. So I do it online, because I don't have to deal with certain political aspects that I did when I was in district. But I do want to go back in person. That is my goal, my little goal for myself. Once I'm finally better, I can go back in person. So, I do think it's important though. We have to know ourselves because I'm sorry, my friend, we're going to be leading the way, like, especially with your own accommodations. So
well, we have to, we definitely have a huge responsibility with that because there are very few of us, and if we don't lead the way, I don't know anyone who will, genuinely.
Well, and the worst part is, and I'll be very upfront with you, I had I call it an honorary curse of working with someone who was also on the spectrum. She was not in an educator program, never had any experience with teaching. And I tried to create her accommodations, which is actually why I got into my business side of things. And they almost made me quit teaching, let alone quit advocating for autistics in the workforce because they were a nightmare. I would be in district meetings, not even at the same school site, and they would still attack me. So I tell people that because every teacher I talked to in like HR, that's what they think of autism now, is that one person who was a nightmare. And so not only do we have to go in and be like, I'm not the nightmare person you just dealt with because that person was a nightmare. It's like, I'm different,
so.
And so I was warned teachers, like that's the only, by the way, autistic educator I had met, and they were a nightmare. And then I had the blessing of working with another one, and we're still friends. So, I mean, she, like I said, the first person was a nightmare. I have nothing really good to say about them. And not only that, but they were breaking the law with IEPs, which was my big, like, not only are you screwing up my job now, you're screwing up kids. So, but good news is it sounds like they're no longer working as an educator. So that's good. And I tell people that because I'm like, that one educator made me feel horrible. And the district was like, yeah, like, this is why we don't usually hire neurodiversity. And I'm like, no, but you can't blame them. It's a double-edged sword. I hate it because I'm like, So I always tell people, I'm like, we need autistic educators who are in it for the right reasons.
Totally.
We need autistic educators who are not going to ruin it for the rest of us. Selfishly, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, please stop screwing it up. And you seem to have a good head on your shoulders. So I'll tell you, I'm like, you'll be one of the good ones. But yeah, I've only met one bad autistic educator who like I said, they challenged everything I believed in with autism and education.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, so I come in with an experience now of like, damn it, why do I have to understand why the districts feel that way?
Yeah.
But it also gives me a power when I'm talking to them too. Like, hey,
well,
I'm not this kind of person.
It's sort of like taking the red pill, so to speak. It's like you open up to all the harsh realities of this, rather than staying ignorant, but like feeling like happy and all that. So
well, and then I found that I'm happy with how I present things, right? So it changed how I presented my accommodations. I came in like, here's my list of accommodations, here's my doctor's notes, here's why I need my accommodations.
Because you work off like what went good and what went bad, and then you're able to like merge them together to create your own thing. So
it's called a teachable moment. So I would say, to answer your last question, I am a teachable moment to everyone around me, whether or not it be my students, my parents I worked with, or my colleagues. A teachable moment. Yeah, right. So you'll have tons of them, and I think some of the best educators I know have used our disabilities as teachable moments. So yeah, I'm glad to have you joining our workforce. We need more autistic educators and speducators.
And I will add that, like, from my experience, a community of teachers is just incredible.
Yeah, you're not going to find bad ones. Like, it's very hard to find a bad teacher, by the way, and they're usually tenured. They're like the tenured teacher or their electives. And that's like, oh.
For the graduating class and the new teachers coming in, like 95% of them are the sweetest and most caring people I've ever known.
Oh, and I'll tell you, like, you're going to keep that community of teachers, keep them. Like, even as a graduate, I graduated, oh my God, my bachelor's degree 4 years ago now. I still talk to my colleagues like that I met in college. Like we were, clombered, right? They always ask me IEP questions. They have an autistic kid. Hey, Carrin, I have an autistic kid. What would you do? And I feel that. I feel like new educators, because I'm a newer educator, we have this different vibe. We were taught student relationships come first, social emotional learning, and all these things that a lot of older educators are like mind boggled by. I remember being in a PD and I was, they're like, oh my God, what this SEL thing is amazing. I'm like, yeah, I had 7 classes on it in college.
Oh my goodness.
Or like one of the teachers was like, I didn't know that racism was in SPED. And I'm like, yeah, I literally took a course on that in college. So I think, the colleges are really good at teaching us all like the psychology and the like, what's it called? It's the psychology that the problem I'll tell you up front is putting it into practice in a system that's not designed for it. Like the system you're going into really isn't designed for how we were taught to teach. So you have to kind of take how you were taught to teach and force it to work in a system. And those are some of the best teachers I know. When I used to work in person, I'd be at school at 7 a.m, and then I would leave at 6 p.m. every day.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was whether or not I was teaching SPED or English. And
did you get burned out?
I did, which is part of the problem, right? I mean, those are long days and, it was tough. I mean, one of my teacher friends, they were like, I need to make you a nap desk. You open the desk there, you can take a nap, Carrin, then you're all good. So, and that's part of the reason I had to leave the workforce was because like, not the workforce, but like the classroom setting was because I'm like, I'm burned out. Yeah. And then in special education, I didn't have my own classroom, which was a really hard thing because like I needed a place to de-zone, like, right? Kids are loud. They're like, got it going. So when I was working every single day, 2 different sites, one middle school, one elementary, I was overstimmed.
It was too much. Yeah. I think that's too much for a neurotypical, it's, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them, my favorite feedback was, I said, could you open the windows just like to let natural light in? Because I have a headache from the lights, which I will warn you, as a teacher, when you have your own class, you can control the light setting. It's great. I used to do it when I taught English so much. I would be like controlling my lights. I brought in my own, but in SPED, I couldn't as much. And so the teachers are like, girl, natural light made all the kids behave better. All of them. What is it about the LED lights like right above us, because they were in portables, which are just, yeah. So I'll tell you, it's a fun experience. I say because you're still in college, do you do field work or work studies?
I'm going to do that in 2 semesters.
Utilize it to the max.
Yeah.
And if you're able to start working at summer camps or anything to do with education in the summer.
I'm getting a job starting in May for the YMCA.
So. Here's why I say that. It is what made me as an educator more comfortable in the classroom, because my program did it since freshman year. I transferred in. Yeah. And so I'd already co-taught, I'd already worked with teachers, and it helps, especially with autism. Like for me, it's very literal, right? I am literally in a classroom learning, and that practical teaching component was so helpful. Like I had all these theories they taught me, right? Like, Vygotsky, all of it in my head, and now I get to apply it in practice while I'm working with kids. So I'm glad, because I'm gonna let you know, like, you're gonna make mistakes as an educator. It's okay. Naturally. Right. But if you're able to get that practice before you're the teacher of record, makes a huge difference. I applied to jobs as a first-year teacher, and they thought I'd been teaching for 3 to 4 years. Wow. Just because I had been already in classrooms.
Because of all the practice, yeah.
I also, though, have been in a classroom since I was 20 years old. So I was volunteering, going in, like helping out teachers. When I was I didn't know it, but I was in a college where they're the only AA in education on the West Coast. And they had us just go volunteer in with classes, right? That's where I learned I couldn't work with little, 3rd graders as a 3rd grade teacher. As an assistant, like in SPED, no problem. But if you make me a 3rd grade teacher, the full thing, I couldn't do it, right? And it was so essential, because I was going to go in for education too. I was going to go in for elementary, no joke. So that's when I was like, okay, so I can't teach these kids. I can teach 4th and 5th. So it was really helpful. So I say, if you're able to go into different grades, go into different classes, and just kind of see where you fit, because that's how I found myself as an educator, truly. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. Thank you very much. This was an amazing interview. And I hope a lot of people, educators, see this and are able to hear our stories.
Yes. Thank you so much, by the way, Alex, for having me. It was wonderful. And I'm glad we were able to connect. Thank you, Carol Jean at Social Audi.
Yes, Social Audi made this all possible. Yeah. All right. Well, I look forward to just taking what you've taught me into the classroom.
All right. Thank you.
Have a great day.